guys, I'm SJ from 10 Points of Slashing, and in this video, we are going to be doing a deep dive into the Society of Dragons depicted in the 1998 PlayStation game, Spyro the Dragon. Quick note before we get started here, I know absolutely nothing about sociology, so all of the ratings are just coming from my own opinions on how a society should function, so take that with a grain of salt. But I'm going to be doing my best to look at this society objectively and not through the rose-tinted glasses of nostalgia. So strap yourselves in, this is going to be a lengthy video. Spyro the Dragon is a PlayStation video game released in 1998 and developed by Insomniac Games about a little purple dragon gallivanting through the Dragon Kingdom, rescuing dragons trapped in crystal, collecting gems, recovering stolen dragon eggs, stopping the bad guys, and saving the world. This game, along with its two sequels, received a remaster in the form of Spyro Reignited Trilogy, which is what I will be using to capture all of the gameplay footage in this video. Because it's objectively gorgeous. Its beautiful world, made of vibrant colors and creative level design, has captivated the hearts and minds of the young and old alike for 25 years now. I was on the young end of that spectrum when I first played Spyro, and I can honestly say that there hasn't been a 5-year period over the course of my entire life since playing it for the first time that I didn't revisit and immerse myself in the world. The Dragon Kingdom of Spyro the Dragon is split into 6 major hubs or homeworlds: Artisans, Peacekeepers, Magic Crafters, Beastmakers, Dreamweavers, and Nasty's World. Each homeworld has its own special flair and feel to it, and each homeworld has kind of a job to do in the Dragon World. They all serve a purpose of some kind in the society, and that is exactly what we'll be exploring today: how the dragons in each homeworld of this weird class system contribute to society as a whole. I'm going to be doing a breakdown of each homeworld. We're going to start by taking a look at that homeworld's purpose in society, and I'll be assigning a rating on a scale of 1 to 10 based on how productive I feel that purpose to actually be. The ultimate question I'll be asking to get that rating is the job that these dragons do actually important and have a relevant impact on the Dragon Kingdom? And I'll be assigning a second rating based on how efficient I feel the dragons in that homeworld actually are. The question there is, do these people actually do their jobs? From there, we'll dive into the worlds themselves, the population, flora and fauna, environment, etc. I'll be taking a look at the levels in each homeworld and assigning a third and final rating by asking, is the place they live actually conducive to the jobs the dragons in that world are doing? Can they do their jobs there? We'll be operating under a couple assumptions as we build this analysis. First and foremost, that the entirety of the Dragon Kingdom consists of only what we see in this game, which means that we'll be assuming that the total population is 87. That's 74 adult dragons, 12 unborn dragons, and Spyro. And that the only settled space in this kingdom is the levels that we explore throughout the game. So let's jump into it, starting with the first world that you encounter in Spyro the Dragon. Artisans. Arts and entertainment are a crucial part of any society. People need to be able to take a load off and enjoy some finery once in a while. Appreciate some art, relax to some music, enjoy some delicious cuisine, burn some innocent sheep alive for no reason whatsoever. I'd imagine there are occupations in this world that aren't even mentioned. I'd bet therapy is a practice that has most of its presence in Artisans, and after the events of this game, I'm sure the entire population will make use of it. Overall, it seems the Artisans' job is to help the Dragon World relax a little, and I would say this group has been so extremely effective in doing it that the society as a whole was so enraptured in their arts and entertainment and media that they failed to address an extremely serious threat in Nasty Nork. People were too busy admiring brushstrokes in this dude's last painting of the homeworld castle that they couldn't see the giant beams of light descending from the heavens, turning all of their loved ones around them into crystal statues. An artisan even addresses this in the opening cutscene for Spyro the Dragon. He outright says that Nasty Nork is
no threat to the Dragon Kingdom.
The Artisans have done such a stand-up job of entertaining and providing relaxation to the entire kingdom that the massive threat that almost ended the Dragon World was acknowledged and dismissed. A pretty famous quote from a relatively recent book called Those Who Remain by author G. Michael Hopf comes to mind. Hard times create strong men create good times create weak men create hard times. If we follow this philosophy to the letter, it looks like that's exactly what's happening. The dragons of the kingdom are caught up in their good times and have become complacent. Enter Nasty Nork. So, my first two ratings for Artisans, I'm gonna give them a 9 for importance and a 10 for efficiency. Like I said, arts and entertainment are vital and have been a major part of human society for as long as history remembers. And these dragons did such an incredible job that the entire civilization was almost completely wiped out. This is, of course, assuming that long-term imprisonment in crystal leads to death. Let's dive into their world a little bit. There are 16 dragons, 17 if you include Spyro, living in the Artisans world. From a human perspective, that is a tiny population, but if you consider that these are dragons we're talking about, that's a whole shitload of dragons. Within the Artisans world, there's a grand total of 1,000 treasure, which, as you'll see later, makes the Artisans the poorest class of dragons in the game. Fitting, being that they're artists and entertainers. There are also 2 dragon eggs to be found in Artisans, which, once hatched, would bring the total population here, including Spyro, to 19. Their world is broken up into 4 major playable areas and 1 bonus flight level, as is the case with every other homeworld we'll be discussing. Artisans mostly consists of rolling green hills, lakes, and castles dotting the landscape. There seems to be some kind of a disagreement between the local shepherds and the dragons, as the shepherds attack Spyro on sight. Pretty odd decision to be living in the Dragon Kingdom and get upset about dragons, but I digress. The Norks have come in force to Artisans, so most levels feature them as the primary antagonists. Stone Hill is a beautiful, scenic place that seems like the absolute perfect place to go to relax. Given the occupations of the dragons here, I'd say this would be the ideal location to create art. It's gorgeous, serene, and could create inspiration for any artist to ply their craft. Town Square is, well, when you and I think of a town square, I'd reason that we think of a bustling center of trade and commerce. This is like a couple buildings in the middle of a lake, I guess. And it's got a bull problem. Pretty underwhelming for a town square. If anything, I'd say this region has the most buildings and appears to be where some dragons could make their homes, I suppose. Dark Hollow is probably my favorite level in the Artisans world, as it fits my creepy mage vibes the best. There's bookshelves everywhere, it's dark. There's a super cool room with some water in it that looks like it may be a study of some kind. I'd say this would probably be the perfect place for an artisan to take up some R&R. And part of an artisan's R&R is probably study or appreciation of other artisans' work. Then there's Toasty. I'm gonna take a minute to talk about some of the things that apply to all of the boss worlds in Spyro. The name of each boss world, in this case Toasty, refers to the actual boss in that level, which means I'm sure this particular place wasn't called Toasty before Nasty Nork and his goons moved in. Also, each boss world seems to be composed of or revolves around one singular building or castle or keep of some kind. With that said, Toasty follows those same rules. It's a couple courtyards around a major castle. There seem to be a few open forum meeting space type areas where dragons could meet and have philosophical discussions about art and stuff. The flight levels are pretty unremarkable in the context of this analysis, but I do want to point out something in Sunny Flight. There are train tracks, which indicate some form of logistics infrastructure. However, the track itself just loops around this rock formation in the middle of a lake. And what's being transported is explosive barrels? I have no idea why this is here. So, is the Artisans' homeworld itself conducive to the Artisans themselves doing their jobs? Yes, absolutely. 10 out of 10. I feel that with its calm landscapes, scenic views, and general serenity, this is the perfect place for an artist to zen the hell out and find some inspiration to create art, music, theater, cuisine, videos applying sociology to a dragon civilization in a video game made for children, and otherwise. So there's Artisans. I'll throw a quick recap of my ratings for this world up, and we'll jump into the next homeworld. All in all, as you'll see as we get deeper into this ridiculous society, Artisans is definitely a top performer. Peacekeepers. Like it or not, an armed force is an extremely important part of any functional civilization. You have to be able to protect and defend your people from threats, whether those threats are internal or external. The dragons of the Peacekeepers are all seemingly absolute badasses and are super jacked and have cool weapons and stuff, in addition to being dragons. And also, they got completely creamed by Nasty Nork and his minions and chose to do nothing about it, except for one notable individual, even after a juvenile dragon ran around freeing them from their prisons. They were like,
"Oh, hey kid, you freed me. Thanks a million. By the way, my name is, Dvorzak the Destroyer. I'm the great dragon general that led our unified forces against the terror that was Gobnoblus the Grey in the 5th War against Avalar. And, I'm just gonna go take a nap now. Good luck with saving the world. You got this, kid."
Honestly, the game designers did such a great job of making each of these dragons appear imposing and huge, and most of them have gruff, deep voices. They seem extremely intimidating, and they just did nothing. Again, even after they were all freed, there was only one Peacekeeper dragon that chose to attempt an assault on Nasty's world. For context, when you get to Nasty's world, the final homeworld in the game, the dragons you encounter there are dragons that Spyro has freed before. There are a total of 6 dragons that make up the assault force that chose to attempt to overthrow Nasty, 2 of which were Artisans, 1 Beastmaker, 1 Magic Crafter, 1 Dreamweaver, and then this guy. Way to go, Magnus.
Hey, Spyro!
Why even have an armed force if every other dragon in the kingdom is just as capable as they are at waging war? All in all, it has to be said, the Peacekeepers are an absolutely pathetic class of dragons that let a child artisan save the world for them. Several of them even comment on how they know that Spyro is fighting the good fight, and they still choose not to help him. My first 2 ratings for Peacekeepers. A 10 for importance, an armed force is necessary, and a big fat 1 for efficiency. This is the most completely useless armed force in probably any video game ever, of all time. Getting into their world, there are, again, 16 dragons that make up this class. However, apparently war is profitable because the Peacekeepers have a grand total of 2,000 treasure in their world, twice that of the Artisans. There are 3 dragon eggs here, and I'm actually going to take this opportunity to point something out here. All of the dragons across the entire civilization are male, which means... Okay guys, it's 2023. I understand that in the world that we live in today, if you were born a male and you truly feel in your core that you are a female or vice versa, the world will accept you for that. I will accept you for that. However, this game was released in 1998, long before the culture of acceptance that we live in today. I know I make a very firm statement in saying that all of these dragons are male. However, that's because I can safely make the assumption that if the game designers in 1998 chose to give these fictional dragons traditionally male voices and traditionally male personas, they're male, guys. Don't cancel me for misgendering a cartoon dragon. Jesus Christ. That dragons either have some kind of asexual reproductive system, or there is a queen of some kind that not a single dragon ever mentions that lives in a faraway land, as in the third Spyro game, which I'll refrain from talking about as much as I can. Dragon eggs are delivered to the kingdom by fairies from somewhere else. So, yeah. Asexual reproduction makes a lot of sense, as most of the dragons share character models and look identical. And in asexual reproduction, offspring commonly appear to be clones of the parent. Anyway, that was weird. Moving along. The Peacekeepers reside in a barren desert. Most of their worlds take place in canyons, on cliff sides, and otherwise. And honestly, man, I'm a sucker for a desert level. I love the level design in Peacekeepers, so my rage-induced tirade about how much they suck ends here. Their worlds are primarily dominated by the Nork invasion, so enemies here are just Norks and angry desert wildlife. Something interesting that I'd like to point out, however, is the distinct lack of an armory of any kind. The Reignited trilogy did an incredible job adding a considerable amount of character and detail to a world that was already filled to the brim with it. And the dragons in this realm were depicted wielding various weapons. However, there is no armory of any kind to be seen anywhere. This suggests that the only weapons the Peacekeepers have at their disposal are the ones currently wielded by the existing dragons. Which honestly isn't too much of a head scratcher, considering, well, they're dragons. But again, if every other dragon in this kingdom is capable of the same level of destruction and devastation as the Peacekeepers, why even have this faction? Cliff Town is an awesome little town sitting on a mesa overlooking some rolling sand dunes. It's got a cool little arena that you start off in that I really want to believe is used for some kind of one-on-one training, but I'm sorry, I have to say it. I hesitate to assume that these guys are doing any kind of training whatsoever. As far as the denizens here go, there are some metal cape-wearing guys that are extremely aggressive and may pose a bit of an annoyance to the general population here. There are also these weird humanoid creatures that look like their sole purpose is to cook delicious gem stew and, I guess, defend it with their lives. So there's that. Dry Canyon is just that, a canyon in the desert. And if you take a look at the level design, it seems like this place could serve as some kind of obstacle course for an adult dragon. Definitely lends itself to the whole training area idea. There's even a dragon who suggests that Dry Canyon rewards good gliders, and if you run this level in a straight line, taking the left path through the tunnel and looping around the exit portal, it'll lead you to that point where the glide is kind of the final trial of this obstacle course and ends with a stellar view as a reward. I'm just gonna go ahead and say that my Spyro headcanon is that that is exactly what Dry Canyon is, a training area for soldier dragons. Ice Cavern is probably where these guys go to chill out. Every other world in Peacekeepers looks blisteringly hot. So if I was a Peacekeeper who just clocked out and had some time to kill, I'd probably make my way here to kick back a bit and cool off. This level is exactly what it sounds like. A cavern that is really, really cold. There's an older dragon in here absolutely living his best life, and I'd like to think he's some kind of retired warfighter that never deployed, so he spent his entire life roasting in the desert and has chosen to live out the rest of his days freezing his tail off. You go, Asher. Dr. Shemp is a world that definitely fits my "this is an area designed specifically for Peacekeepers to train" idea. There are 3 circular platforms in a massive arena-type building, and like I said, it looks like this was built for training or perhaps even some kind of combat exhibitions. Either way, it makes sense that Shemp and his cronies moved in pretty easily, since I'd be willing to bet there was 0 training happening here when Nasty decided to upend the world. Night Flight is another pretty unremarkable flight level, but again, I'd like to just point out an interesting little tidbit. The lighthouses here suggest that ships sail through this area quite often, or have in the past. They might also just be for dragons flying over the water, but I'm gonna go with ships. The only 3 homeworlds surrounded by water like this are Artisans, Peacekeepers, and Nasty's World. And Nasty's World houses the only ships we see in the entire game. If the ships are coming from Nasty's World, this suggests some kind of cooperation between the Dragon Kingdom and probably the former residents of Nasty's World. I have no idea what conclusion you can draw from that about this society, but have fun. I am going to give the Peacekeepers a 7 for their 3rd rating. The desert is a harsh and brutal mistress, and I believe it to be ideal for strengthening the mind against physical adversity. Do I think that these dragons living here specifically would help them be able to do their jobs better? Yes, I absolutely do, so I should give them a 10. However, they didn't do their jobs, guys, which leads me to believe that maybe the desert isn't such a great place for dragons specifically to practice warfighting. Maybe they need even more adverse conditions to kick them into gear and get them doing their jobs. Something to consider, I guess, is that lizards are cold-blooded and generally prefer warmer environments. So if dragons too are cold-blooded, perhaps if more of their world was underground in the ice cavern, they would have had the fortitude necessary to do the bare minimum their job requires. Who knows? But take a look at the final ratings for the Peacekeepers as we prepare to move to the next world. Magic Crafters. Listen, me being who I am, I love magic. I think it's cool as hell. And I guess in a society where magic is an actual, tangible, real thing, you need an organization dedicated to it. However, as I'm sure you've gathered from listening to me rant about the horrors of magic in my other content, I also feel like a force as devastating as magic should probably be regulated. Maybe these guys do that too, but it seems like their primary purpose is to just be magical, to make magic shit. So I guess if their primary purpose is to manipulate magic to help automate things or move lifts or open doors or serve the people somehow, yeah, they're pretty productive members of society, but I wouldn't call them the crux upon which dragon society is built by any means. But it seems like they do a damn good job, as pretty much every world in Spyro has some kind of magical stuff in it. There are some worlds that could definitely benefit more from it, but job well done, I guess? Most worlds across the entire game have some kind of magic whirlwind, and every single world makes use of the return home portals, and portals in general, to transport dragons from place to place. I'm going to assume that these are products of the Magic Crafters. There are also the supercharge ramps, which don't even start showing up in the game until Magic Crafters. I'm sure these were designed by them as well. There are also the pads that light up and allow access to sunny flight in Artisans. A Magic Crafter dragon is actually the one that tells you about these pads if you haven't discovered them yet.
Listen carefully, Spyro.
Is this dragon the architect of that mechanism? Also, what is the motivation in hiding that portal behind a puzzle? Was there some kind of eldritch horror contained in Sunny Flight in ages past that has since expired? Or perhaps Sunny Flight is the world that is physically closest to the junkyard that Nasty was banished to, so they locked it up. Who knows? More conjecture and headcanon, but I'm into that idea. Rating time. I'll reiterate here that with magic being actually tangible in this universe, it is important that you have a group of dragons dedicated to the use and manipulation of it. With that said, I feel like maybe magic watchers or magic guardians may have been a more appropriate and productive class, as if these guys specifically exist to just make magic stuff, then I wouldn't deem them as useful as a group that exists to regulate magic in general or protect the world from threats related to magic. So I'll give them a cool 7 on importance and a 9 on efficiency. They're losing that 1 point there for the sole reason that they probably could have built some kind of device to protect against Nasty's magic. The Dragon Kingdom as a whole recognized the threat in Nasty Nork and knew he's capable of magic. But I'll still give them a 9 on the assumption that their actual job is to just make magic stuff and not necessarily defend against threats from magic stuff. That's probably more Peacekeepers territory. In theory, the Magic Crafter's world has some of the most beautiful scenery in all of Spyro the Dragon, and it seems the Nork invasion force didn't make it up to Magic Crafters. There is 0 Nork presence across the entire world. Perhaps due to its remote location in the mountains? Maybe it was like an invading Russia in the winter type thing. Instead, it seems that a band of magically inclined ne'er-do-wells has taken advantage of the chaos in the Dragon Kingdom to stage an uprising, and just generally sow their own brand of chaos throughout Magic Crafters. And look, I know that the game tells you that Nasty uses magic to turn gems into minions fighting for his cause, but it's pretty much explicitly stated that he converted the treasure into an army of Norks. And these guys aren't Norks. Besides, I honestly just like my narrative better, so fuck it. Wizard Guy Uprising. There are 14 adult dragons populating the Magic Crafter's world and 7 unhatched dragon eggs. These guys are rocking a whopping 2,500 treasure, making them the wealthiest class of dragons so far. Which makes sense if you consider the fact that they have the most tangible job so far, so they actually develop products that the rest of the dragon world probably has to purchase. Alpine Ridge is a series of cliffs on a mountainside with some towers and castles built into the rock. They seem to have some kind of
Big, noisy, gigantic, awful beast
infestation. The druids that occupy the homeworld have taken up residence here as well, using their magic to move platforms around and cause problems for Spyro. The armored druids seem to have found a way to mount the beasts and use them to their advantage. Pretty crafty. The mage uprising also seems to be facing some internal strife. There's an ice wizard and a druid squaring off against each other here. If I had to guess, I'd say this is some kind of either breeding ground or housing for these
big, noisy, gigantic, awful beast.
Maybe they're Magic Crafters lab rats and are used for some kind of experimentation. In the high caves, you'll encounter a massive 8-legged problem. There are spiders that live in the caves with metal skin that prevents you from being able to torch these guys. The metal skin leads me to believe that they aren't a natural occurrence, which we'll be getting into soon. The level itself has some gorgeous scenery, again following the conventions we've seen so far in Magic Crafters. Towers built into the cliffside, snow-capped mountains in the distance, the works. The Mage Uprising seems to be in full force here as well, as you'll find ice wizards and druids here wreaking havoc. This is also the only location across the entire game that you'll find a band of fairies that will catch you and bring you back up to solid ground if you fall. There has to be a reason for this. Dragons must fall here quite a bit. Maybe this is the place that the supercharge ramp was actually developed at. That would explain the almost ritualistic placement of it and the fairies. Its remote location would help hide it from any druids or other such miscreants that may have been interested in stealing the technology. Wizard Peak seems like a sweet spot for dragons to ride the supercharge train, baby. There are supercharge ramps placed all over this level in crazy configurations. I'm thinking this is either where the ramps were put into testing after the development of them, or it's some kind of wild dragon theme park. Again, a remote location high in the mountains where magic crafters can do their work. Blowhard has probably my favorite aesthetic in the Reignited trilogy. Calming, cool colors, windmills in the distance. It follows the same trend in boss levels we've seen, where it's kind of a series of courtyards outside of a castle. From the outside, this place looks incredibly peaceful. Maybe some kind of monastery or a place where magic is, I don't know, more potent than it is elsewhere. It just has this vibe of being kind of regal and more important than other places. Maybe the arch magic crafter lives here and directs magic crafting. Another fun fact about the flight level in this realm: the crystals in Crystal Flight look like they're exactly the same as the ones in Night Flight, which means you can pretty logically assume that this level takes place near Night Flight, which is in Peacekeepers territory. So these two realms have to be relatively close to each other. Again, I'm not a sociologist or a geologist, but I've seen a few movies in my day, and I feel like this is a thing. Same rocks, same place, something like that. Anyway, my third rating for these guys is a bit of an odd one. Is this a place that they can do their job in? Honestly, I'm gonna give them a 5. A remote location, far separated from most of the rest of the Dragon Kingdom, seems like the ideal place to be weird hermits and do magic stuff in peace. But clearly that's not the case. Because as soon as the kingdom was overwhelmed by Nasty's invasion, these guys moved in force and started wrecking the place. One of the dragons comments on how annoying the druids are.
Please do something about these green druids. They insist on moving everything in sight.
And there's an implication that the magic crafters are very aware of them, even though they've been turned into crystal. So they've probably been there, at least in small numbers, since before Nasty moved in. So I'm going to give them a score that is straight down the middle. This place could be a 10 if there wasn't a massive uprising happening. But these guys were close enough to and familiar enough with the magic crafters world that as soon as the dragons were frozen, they just took over the place. Here are the final ratings for magic crafters as we prepare to leave the mountains and descend into my absolute least favorite realm. Beastmakers. What the fuck? Why? An entire class dedicated to making weird animals? Unless this organization exists to make weird animals specifically to eat or gather resources from, like leather and fur, these people have absolutely no reason to exist. None whatsoever. They just run around, and I say run around because they all look a bit too large to be getting airborne anytime soon, being swampy and gross and grunting and making absolute abominations of creatures that seemingly plague the kingdom. I would bet money that Norks themselves are the brainchild of some asshole in Beastmakers. With all that said, great job, guys. Mission accomplished. If your entire occupation is to make gnarly amalgamations of other animals to create newer, more disgusting animals, you did it. Awesome work. In every level of Spyro, there's some type of beast inhabiting it, and more than a few of them are just a straight-up problem. I'm going to throw a list up here of every animal encountered through every level of Spyro and whether or not I think they're problematic. So, yeah, like I said, if the goal here is to create animals that serve a purpose, like producing milk or honey or leather or fur, then yeah, I can see these guys being absolutely vital to the society. But those creatures already exist, and it is implied that they make animals out of other animals. So To summarize, I'll be basing my overall importance rating on these 3 factors. 1. As it is never specified in-game why they are making beasts, it can be inferred that there is no purpose beyond just make weird animals, Lamau. 2. All of the beasts in the Beastmaker's world are horrifying abominations that don't seem to serve any purpose whatsoever. And 3, we can assume all of these beasts were made before the Nork invasion, as all of the actual dragons are frozen in crystal. So all of these incredibly problematic creatures have nothing to do with the fact that there's an evil guy trying to take over the world, and they owe no allegiance to him. As you can see by the pig things chasing down Norks in one of the levels. So here it is. Importance 0. There's no reason you should exist. Maybe this was just some weird cult of swamp dwellers that the other dragons were like,
I mean, there's more than 10 of them now. I guess we should give them a job.
and some drunk artisan was like,
Beastmakers!
who knows. However, as for efficiency, 10, 100, 1,000. I mean, look at this thing. Amazing work, guys. Let's talk about the Beastmaker's population and living situation. There are 12 dragons in this realm. This is the lowest population of any of the 5 major dragon worlds. And that honestly adds up to me. This place is gross, and I feel like it takes a very special kind of mindset to say things like,
And this used to be such a nice swamp.
I'm with Spyro on this one, guys.
I'm sure it was.
However, here's a weird statistic for you. The Beastmaker's world has 2,500 treasure. That is the highest number of treasure per dragon in the entire Dragon Kingdom. That means that these guys, the ones with the most useless job, are bringing in the highest amount of income somehow. It really does feel like the rest of the kingdom is just placating these guys so they stop showing up to meetings all stinky and gross. Like, somebody woke up one day and was like,
Yo, I have an idea. Let's take the smelliest, weirdest motherfuckers from each realm and put them all together in one equally smelly realm. They'll stop tracking mud and pig shit into our castles, and they can all go be smelly and gross in peace.
the best example of every point I've made on the Beastmakers is Misty Bog. This is a swampy area with some seemingly dragon-made fences and castles, and is home to some of the most challenging combat encounters in the entire game. And that challenge comes from the horrors that populate this place. Weird tree things that come alive and eat you, mutant frogs that have razor-sharp tongues with an effective range of like 10 meters, giant rage-filled pig things that charge and impale you. This has to be the lowest market value neighborhood to live in the entire Dragon Kingdom. Even the Nork invaders don't stand a chance here. Like, this is the first neighborhood that out-of-state college kids move into when they decide to start going to Dragon University and just need a cheap place to live for a few months while they get on their feet. Despicable. Treetops is one of the most notorious and interesting levels in Spyro the Dragon. And I'd just like to point something out here. In the Reignited trilogy, several of the dragons in the Beastmaker's realm are depicted as struggling to fly, or they're just laying around, or are generally depicted as lazy. Treetops is absolutely littered with supercharge ramps. Here is my headcanon. There's supercharge ramps everywhere because these dragons can't fly. They need the ramps to be able to get up to speed to navigate this level. And now I'm gonna make a contradictory counterpoint to myself. Wouldn't the actual physics of stepping onto a supercharge ramp drive your heart rate up astronomically? I feel like the metabolism of the Treetops Beastmakers must be insanely awesome due to the amount of supernatural cardio they're getting. So maybe they are actually in really, really good shape.
Amazing!
And then there's Terrace Village. probably the most normal place to live so far. Looks like some kind of town in the middle of a swamp with some pretty well-made buildings. There is a dragon here that specifically points out that when the Norks moved in, they set up the electric panels littering the level, which I feel like is a huge endeavor. It seems to me that there had to exist some kind of infrastructure already to support installing these electric panels, or it would have taken forever. Or maybe the Nork invasion force got so tired of the wildlife that they were like, dude, let's just roast them all. And every member of that Nork unit, came together to build the panels. Finally, we have Metalhead. All in all, if I had to live somewhere in Beastmakers, it would be here. This seems like a completely normal town-type setting with minimal wildlife. There are these huge assembly areas that make up the boss fight arena that I can only assume were some kind of arena for these guys to pit fight their abominations. And nothing too much to say about Wild Flight. More of those weird crystals. To sum it all up for Beastmakers, ew. I'm giving them a 5 on how conducive their place to live is to doing their jobs. Because the manual says they can find natural clay and sticks and stuff here to do their work, which I guess makes sense. But their work is creating problematic animals that probably interfere with their ability to do their job, and the entire world is completely infested by them. So you get a 5, and I'm getting the hell out of this swamp, Beastmakers. Dreamweavers. Alright, let me just go ahead and say it. These guys are cool as fuck. An entire order of dragons whose purpose is to protect the dreaming minds of other dragons from nightmares using magic. Honestly, that sounds like a killer job. There's definitely job security. Everybody has a bad dream every now and then. If I was a young dragon lad, recently graduated from Dragon High School and had my entire dragon life ahead of me, and was presented with career options between the 5 I've listed today, I'm 100% going Dreamweavers. They're all mysterious and whimsical, and in the remastered versions, they all have super cool, weird wings. Just super rad all around. And there's not a single dragon in the entirety of the Spyro trilogy that ever mentions having a bad dream. So they're definitely doing their jobs. These dragons also seem the most, put together. And despite their odd whimsy, they seem like they have the most intelligent things to say. Maybe I'm just a Dreamweavers fanboy and I'm going on too long about this, so let's say this. This is a class of dragons that exists to shape reality itself as every member of their race sleeps in order to protect them from nightmares and things that may tear them apart from the inside out. Cool as hell, yeah. But is that a necessary part of this civilization? Are bad dreams so flagrant and common that they hinder progress in some regard? I don't really know how to answer that because, well, they're dragons, and I don't know, maybe bad dreams do mess them up more than humans? Clearly it was a bad enough problem that one of the 5 major homeworlds was dedicated to this career field. So who knows? I could go on and on about how cool the concept of these guys is, so instead I'll try to keep it short and sweet. Due to the fact that an entire faction of dragons, 1 out of only 5, exists to protect other dragons from bad dreams, the implication there is that this is a serious problem. Serious enough that other potentially more helpful factions weren't even a consideration to the leaders of the kingdom. There's no food gatherers or lawmakers. There's Dreamweavers, though. So again, seemingly pretty important. And to reiterate here, not a single dragon mentions ever having a bad dream, in this game or in any sequels. So it seems like they're doing their job, even if there's no telling how important it actually is. So these guys are gonna get probably the oddest scoring out of all 5 realms. I'm going to give the Dreamweavers a 5 for importance right now, just due to the fact that it could be important if there was more information about the dragon nightmare problem, but there isn't. And this faction could easily be replaced by a more productive one, so I'm giving them a score smack dab in the middle, but we are going to revisit this later. As far as their efficiency goes, I'm giving them a solid 10 with a caveat. If at any point in time in the future of this franchise, a single dragon complains about having a bad dream, I'm gonna make another video rescinding that score. However, for the time being, seems like they're doing their jobs, as if the nightmare problem is big enough to devote an entire class of dragons to it, you'd probably hear some complaining if these guys weren't doing their jobs. The Dreamweaver's world is probably the most interesting one in all of Spyro the Dragon. It takes place in islands floating in the clouds, filled with some pretty awesome castles and towers and such. And there is minimal Nork presence in the Dreamweaver's world. It probably has to do with the fact that they live, quite literally, in the clouds. This place is completely inaccessible, unless you are either A, a dragon, B, one of those weird balloonist guys that gets no explanation whatsoever as to who or what they are, or C, a Nork using some kind of balloon to float up to the islands. In the Dreamweaver's world, there are 16 dragons living here and 2,500 treasure. That makes Dreamweaver's the most populous world out of the 5 as far as actual quantity of dragons and treasure. Now, let's get into the real interesting stuff here. Instead of Norks as enemies, you get to fight... Hold up. These guys probably didn't fly all the way up here. That has to mean that they're native to this world, or were brought here by dragons. Wait a minute. The Dreamweavers protect dragons from nightmares while they sleep. The game, as well as the manual, explicitly states that. But what if, and bear with me on this one, guys, what if the Dreamweavers protect dragons from nightmares by pulling the subjects of those nightmares out of the dream itself and imprison them in their Sky Island fortresses? That would explain why most Dreamweavers worlds are straight up nightmarish in and of themselves, and why these worlds are occupied by the weirdest, scariest creatures in the game. The Dreamweaver's homeworld is a prison for nightmares and eldritch horrors. That means not only do these guys protect dragons from nightmares in their sleep, they also guard the prison and prevent these nightmares from ever going back to the dragon world. That important score just shot up to 9, guys. Imagine a world where every single person slept peacefully at night because there was an organization of protectors dedicated to making sure that happens. I'm still not good with giving them a 10 because this isn't by any means a staple of a traditional society, and that's what I'm ultimately basing this analysis on, but damn, man. When we look at their world through that lens, my original score for them changes completely. So let's dive in, and we're gonna breeze through these so that I can get to my big point here. Lofty Castle is the least nightmare-looking level in the Dreamweaver's world. It's a beautiful castle surrounded by green grass and flowing water. The only Norks in the entirety of Dreamweavers are here and in Haunted Towers, while the rest of the enemy presence here is the escaped prisoners, who seem to have retaliated by imprisoning the local fairies, who are probably some kind of caretakers for the prisons in Dreamweavers. Haunted Towers seems to me to be very clearly a prison, built to house these wizard guys in their magically animated suits of armor. Maybe this is a relic of some kind of dragon conflict from eons past. It's one of my favorite levels in the game for its aesthetic and creepy energy. Dark Passage is another favorite of mine and seems to be where the little devil dudes are mostly contained. This is a labyrinth of passageways surrounding a really cool room in the center of the level. This could absolutely be a prison. Jacques is a sinister looking level that looks like it houses what I assume to be the leader of the Fools, who I'm going to theorize are some other force of caretakers that the Dreamweavers employ to maintain the prison, as they seem to possess the ability to move platforms around and transform beings into less scary versions of themselves. As a side note, these dudes seem to have completely overtaken the Dreamweaver's homeworld itself by seizing what I'm assuming is some kind of defense mechanism. A weapon that, when fired at a living being, does to it what the fools seem to have the innate ability to do: transform them into a less scary version of themselves. It can also toggle back, and I'm going to guess that the Dreamweavers use this weapon as a last resort in case there are any escaped prisoners. The flight level here, Icy Flight, is completely unremarkable. Just some glaciers in a lake. Maybe this is the marker dragons use to find Dreamweavers? That would explain the seemingly useless lighthouses completely surrounded by ice. Maybe they just fly straight up from here. I don't know. To pull it all together, if the Dreamweaver's world is indeed a prison for these nightmarish creatures, the third and final rating for this fascinating class of dragons is a 10. This place seems to be the perfect prison, and assuming the caretakers of this world are doing their jobs, the dragons here could very easily use their weird dark magic or whatever to invade the dreaming minds of other dragons and rip their fears straight out of them. For some perspective, this score was originally much lower. My thought process was, this place doesn't seem to be very conducive to them doing their jobs, as it's riddled with these scary, freaky creatures. But it totally makes sense if this is their prison, and the Dreamweavers employ other creatures to look after it. After the dragons were all frozen in crystal, the prisoners rioted and took over the world. Makes sense to me. So that's Dreamweavers, guys. What a wild ride. I'll throw their scores up and we'll jump right into the summary and final scoring. Alright guys, I'm gonna throw the scores up for each homeworld before we move into the final statistics. For the final statistics, I'm gonna be including what I'm calling the wealth per dragon score. To get that score, I'm basically taking the total number of treasure in the realm and dividing it up evenly between the number of dragons and eggs. I'm then ranking each world. Since there are 5 worlds and I'm doing a scale of 10, they get 2 points per their rank on the list. Here are the scores for each homeworld so far. And the final ranking for each homeworld is: in 5th place, Peacekeepers. In 4th place, Peacemakers. In 3rd place, Magic Crafters. Taking 2nd place, Artisans. And absolutely crushing everybody else with an almost perfect score, 1st place goes to Dreamweavers. So there you have it. I find it interesting that the only homeworld that got a 10 for importance ended up as the lowest rank on the list. And I'm honestly pretty pissed Peacemakers isn't in that spot. And what seems to be the most fantastical and whimsical class ended up being single-handedly the most important contributor to this batshit society. Way to go, Dreamweavers. As always, thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, or even if you didn't like it at all, let me know with a comment, and of course, like and subscribe to my channel. There's definitely more stuff like this on the way, and it honestly would just really mean the world to me if you did. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I will catch you guys in the next one. See ya.